Well, one of the factors that investors think about when it comes to the S&P 500, yes, it's the Fed, but many people also look at what it means to have an election year. Typically in the fourth year of a presidency, when the incumbent is running for re-election, you see pretty strong returns because the incumbent is incentivized to keep the economy humming along. Let's get some perspective from someone whose job it is to translate the political to the financial. Charles Myers is chairman and founder of Signum Global. He's also been an advisor to various political figures, I think mostly on the Democratic side, right? Is that correct, Charles?
Yes, it is.
Great to be with you to kick off the new year. Is it looking like pretty much a done deal? It's going to be a Biden-Trump showdown come November?
Yeah, I think sitting here today, it's looking very much like a Trump-Biden rematch. President Trump has so much momentum in the Republican primary, which actually kicks off this coming Monday. So the election cycle officially starts this Monday in Iowa, and he's 34 points ahead of his nearest opponent in Iowa. The only thing I think that would derail a Trump nomination at this point would be a major health issue, which you cannot predict. So I do think it is looking like a Biden-Trump rematch.
None of these other issues that are going on with Trump that are trying to prevent him from being on the ballot?
No, I mean, President Trump has 91 criminal indictments that he's, facing through 4 different trials. And even if he's convicted on all 91 counts, some of which are felonies, he can still run for president. In fact, interestingly, in the state of Florida, if he's convicted of some of the felonies, he can't actually vote, but he can still run for president.
What about Nikki Haley? What's her role in all of this?
Nikki Haley's the one to watch. She has momentum, but I don't know if it's enough momentum to really enable her to knock Trump off the top spot. New Hampshire is the second primary, which is on January 23rd. Nikki Haley is polling second at 29%. Trump is still 15 points ahead of her, even in New Hampshire. So unless Chris Christie drops out and all of his support will go to Nikki Haley, she might then win New Hampshire. The problem with New Hampshire is it's never been really predictive of the ultimate outcome. After New Hampshire, we have South Carolina. President Trump will win that. Then March 5th is Super Tuesday, which is a third of all delegates. It's 16 states. And I think by March 5th, Trump will have it pretty much locked up.
Bulls are pointing to the fourth year of a presidential cycle going into an election year. The incumbent, it tends to be good for markets. Do you think that's going to hold true this year?
I do. I think you have 2 actually very positive things this year. One, what you just mentioned, the Biden administration doing everything possible to inject stimulus into the economy. A lot of it's coming from legislation that was passed 2 years ago, the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS Act, and the infrastructure bill. That funding, that government spending just, continues well into this year and beyond. So that's incredibly helpful. Secondly, you do have the Fed that has announced they're going to pivot to accommodation. So I would argue for the markets, the setup this year is actually very constructive.
There is still this, and you see it in the coverage, and especially here in Canada, which is experiencing worse economic performance than what we're seeing south of the border. Still south of the border, I guess they call it like a vibe session. People still don't feel great about the economy. Why is that? Is it particularly acute in certain states?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of 2 things. First, the government spending, the government stimulus that was approved 2 years ago that's ongoing is very targeted, and very intentionally targeted by the Biden administration and the Democrats to manufacturing, semiconductors, and renewables. Therefore, that's where some of the heaviest investment in government spending has been. And therefore, because it's so targeted, it's not necessarily spilling over into all sectors of the economy so that everybody's feeling better. So I think that that's part of it. It's a much more narrow, much more targeted form of stimulus. Secondly, I think that there's just a general sense of malaise that is a bit of a hangover still from COVID, from much higher interest rates. Yes, the Fed's going to pivot this year, but interest rates are still at 20-year highs in the United States. And I think that's also hurting a number of people on the consumption side. What's
the chatter, if any, about the role of very prominent, very vocal billionaires? Of course, Elon Musk is one of them, but very recently, Bill Ackman of Pershing has taken up I don't know what you'd call it, but certainly he's gone after the presidents of a number of these high-profile universities, all emerging from the Israel-Hamas attacks. But then it's kind of taken on its own life, going after DEI, somebody who's thought of to be very Democratic allied. But are we watching that shift in real time?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing generally in this country is billionaires becoming much more activist on many fronts, including politically, not just as shareholders in companies that they're investing in, but actually in politics and in some of our more contentious social issues, including anti-Semitism. Some of it's good, some of it isn't. I think that they feel, very strongly the world has changed a lot since COVID. Geopolitical risk is much higher today than it was even 3 years ago. And I think that given the Israel-Hamas war, the expression of anti-Semitism around the world has also been of deep concern. So I don't think it's not that surprising that some of our billionaires, our most successful executives, are becoming much more activist beyond the companies that they invest in. Some might say that they're taking it a little bit too far.